Well, hello, Lady Grove Park Primary School. I hope you're keeping well and learning lots. In case you're fairly new to the school and wondering who this strange guy is, my name's Hugh. I'm the minister of the Lady Grove Church. We normally meet on a Sunday morning in the school hall of All Saints School, just down the road from you. But during this coronavirus, we are currently not able to meet there, so we're doing everything via Zoom. And normally I would come into school once a month to do an assembly exploring ideas of faith, but again, because of COVID at the moment, it's far more sensible that I do once a month one of these recordings which your teacher can show to you. And I understand that at the moment this week we're looking at thinkers, so I thought that's what I'll do. I'm just going to stick up a PowerPoint to get us thinking about thinkers, and I'll disappear into the top right hand corner. There we go. Okay, so obviously one of the big things about thinking is asking questions. Life is full of them, isn't there? And there's some of these that I found in photographs. We ask questions about so many things. And that one in the bottom right-hand corner, I guess, is really important. You know, why am I here? What's my purpose in life? And education, being at school, I guess, is a really helpful tool in finding at least some answers to that, as you discover what you're good at, what you're not so good at, how you relate to others. That often helps you sort of paint a picture of where you fit within this huge world of beings doing all different things. And not surprisingly, I guess, the Christian book, the Bible, has loads of questions as well. A lot of people asking, I guess, the similar questions that you and I ask about what's going on. Why are things not so fair is a big one that gets asked quite a bit. Why is it that the people who are unkind and wicked seem to get on when those who are really nice seem to struggle? Why should this person suffer when that person doesn't? And loads of things like that. But there's one book that I'd like to talk about today where I guess the whole thing is about a story about one person's thinking. It's a book in the Old Testament, so the time before Jesus, and it's called Ecclesiastes. And straight away it raises questions, because if we start, okay, it's a book, it's called Ecclesiastes, what on earth does that mean? And we also sort of say, well, who wrote it? And frankly, the answer is we really don't know. Loads of ideas have come up, but we don't know for sure. It's in the book it talks about the preacher or the teacher, but who this preacher or teacher is, we just don't know. And equally, you know, when was it written? Well, it's in the Old Testament, so we know it was written before the writers started to record Jesus' life on earth some 2,000 years ago. But more than that, we don't really know. Some people think it was possibly about 200 BC, but others think differently. We don't know for sure. But what does the book tell us? Well, as I say, this guy, calling himself the preacher or teacher, well, he observes life, I guess. He watches the sun day in, day out, and he notices that every day it does just the same thing. It starts off in one side of his view and goes across the sky to the other. Now, we're talking about some time ago where they weren't so good at science, so you can understand why he was just sort of amazed that that's what happened. And then he thought about the weather, and he thought, well, the wind blows from the north and sometimes from the south and sometimes from the east, sometimes from the west. We just don't know. The wind is blowing. That's all we can tell. And then he looked at the weather again and thought, well, it rains, and the rain goes into the rivers, and the rivers go into the sea. Why doesn't the sea ever fill up? Why is it never getting more and more? Well, sadly, with global warming, we're discovering, of course, that it is. But for him, that was a big question. What was going on? And then he looked at life in general, and he looked at the flowers and the plants, and he said, right, well, yeah, the plants grow, seeds appear, they drop the seeds, they die, new plants grow up, they grow, they drop seeds, they die, new plants go, and he's going on and on and on. And then he thought about human beings, and he said, well, one generation comes, and then another generation comes, and then another generation comes, and we learn a few things, but we're still making the same stupid mistakes. We still have wars, despite the fact we know that wars are not good for human beings. We still ill-treat the planet, even though we know it's not good for us. Everything goes on and on and on. What is the purpose of life, he asks. And so he starts to try and find out. And he thinks, right, well, I wonder if it's about being amused, about being entertained. And so he spends his life going to parties and going to shows and trying to be watch things that amuse him. And he finds itself very funny. It's quite amusing. But he thinks, I can't go around the rest of my life just laughing at everything. People will think I've lost my mind, that I've gone a bit crazy. No, I can't find it that way. And he thinks, drinking. I'll try have a drink or two. And he drinks and he drinks, and of course he gets I don't think this is going to work. I wake up with this horrible headache in the morning, and I don't think that's the purpose of life. And then he thinks, well, maybe if I make a name for myself by building things. And so he built huge buildings, places where people could live, places where he could live, other places where he could entertain. And he thought, no, I'm really not getting much out of that either. And then he decided, well, about gardening. And he grew lots of beautiful gardens. He grew trees and flowers, places where people could wander and enjoy nature, a really important thing today. But no, he just didn't feel that really was answering the question he was asking. And then he thought, well, maybe I can provide water for everybody. He built reservoirs, he built fountains, he made sure that the gardens he built were very well watered. People could go and have a swim. No, that didn't do it for him either. But he thought, well, maybe if I sort of like become the best farmer out, and he got herds and herds of cattle and flocks of sheep and goats and donkeys and camels and all the animals that he could think of. But no, that just caused him hassle, really. He had too many animals to look after. That wasn't going to really answer his question about what life's all about. He decided to sell everything and got lots and lots of wealth. Gold and silver and platinum and jewels, and he was so wealthy. He was probably the wealthiest man in the world. And well, yeah, but what's this doing for me? Can't spend all of this. No, that doesn't really scratch my itch either. Maybe I should get involved in culture. And so he brought in some wonderful choirs to sing to him. He brought in musicians to play beautiful songs to him. He went to the theatre and watched all the different plays that he could think of. But as you can see, after a while, well, he discovered he wasn't a culture vulture. It all got too much for him. No, that wasn't what he was looking for either. He decided maybe what he needed was a good wife. In fact, in those days, you could have more than one wife. So he decided to have a few just to see if that brought happiness. But as you can see, no, it didn't matter how many wives he had, how many relationships he had, whether he had lots of children or no children. No, that didn't do it either. And in the end, he echoed something that really every time he'd been experiencing these different activities and these different things, he came back with the same conclusion. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher. Nothing has any meaning. That sounds quite pessimistic, doesn't it? It rather paints a rather sad picture of what's the point? It's no good. So, for goodness sake, don't turn to your teacher after this and say, it's all meaningless, teacher. I can't see the point. What this teacher was really saying in the end was some things don't have answers. Some things like, why are we here? Well, we can get a broad understanding. We can see things that do float our boat, as it were. Things that we really feel that when we're doing them, yes. Some footballers talk about when they're playing football, it really feels as though they're doing everything that they were made for. Some people when they write. Some people, I remember reading about somebody who was a road sweeper, who cleaned the roads every day, but felt a real something special when he did it, as though, yeah, this is my place in life. But you couldn't put your finger on why, just that he felt, yeah, this was right for him. And so the writer of Ecclesiastes in the end says, there are some things that we just don't have answers for. That doesn't mean we give up asking, but just that we recognize that some things will never be answered. And actually, that some of the things that we think we know today, in the future we may discover we were wrong about, as other people make new discoveries. The book of Ecclesiastes ends up with the teacher or the preacher simply saying, this is all too much for me. Life is more than I will fully understand. But he looks to God and says, yeah, but God's got it all in hand. As I say, this was written over 2,000 years ago. I want to finish this by talking about someone who's a little bit more up to date. This guy, Albert Einstein, born in 1879 and only died, just over 65 years ago now. He wrote over 300 articles about different aspects of science and another 150 articles about our understanding of much broader things, life in general, how we relate to each other. He is regarded by many people still today as an absolute genius. I'm sure he was a darn sight cleverer than ever I hope to be. A huge thinker of his time and a huge thinker even of our time. Before he died, somebody interviewed him and talked to him about just how amazing he was, how clever he was, how he had learned so much. And this is what he said as a reply. I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself in now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. One of the world's greatest thinkers described himself as a child playing on the seashore, diverting himself by finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell, and recognizing that the great truth of this world lay in a huge ocean before him. I guess a challenge for each one of us, not to just spend our time looking for the simple things, but to look beyond us and recognize there are so many questions that we can ask, so much that we can discover. So here we are at the beginning of, a few weeks into the start of this school year. I encourage you to take an example from the preacher, the teacher that wrote Ecclesiastes, and from Albert Einstein. To be open, to be ready with question after question after question, because it's questions that help us become real great thinkers. I'm just going to finish with a little prayer, which is just my way of having a little chat with God and giving him thanks. You can just listen. You can think about yourself. You can think about some of the questions that you've got in your mind. Are they ones that you're going to look for answers, or are you just simply going to put them to one side and not try and find answers? Just think about them as I say this prayer. And if you agree with the prayer at the end, you can say, as I finish it, with the word Amen, which is just simply a way of saying, yes, I agree. So let's just close our eyes. Or maybe we can focus, if you like, on that picture of those pebbles and the sea beyond them. So God, we thank you for the book of Ecclesiastes. We thank you for that man's search to try and make sense of life. Because we recognize that each one of us is doing that same search, asking what makes us tick, what we enjoy, what we don't enjoy, why we make some friendships and not others, why things happen around us. Help us to learn from him and from Albert Einstein to recognize that, well, we should always be looking for answers. We should always be looking out to that sea of knowledge. But also to recognize, as Albert Einstein did, that we need to be humble enough to recognize we won't know everything. And help us to listen to one another, because we all come with our own little bit of knowledge and experience that we can learn from each other, and help us to share our knowledge with others so that they too can learn from us. Amen. So I hope you keep well, look after one another, stay safe, follow the old cleaning of your hands and avoiding too much social distance, too much closeness with one another. And I'll see you again next month. Take care. God bless.